Welcome back to the final episodes of the Other Side of 45 podcast. I'm your host, Randy Black. This podcast is about taking chances, owning my mistakes, addressing generational family cycles and trauma, completing my 50/50s by 50 list, and my life as a single mother of Gen Z. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Please note that this podcast is actually ending at the end of April, and I will be replacing this podcast with Hike, Heal, and Hustle. Please subscribe and rate the podcast 5 stars. Now, this episode is entitled My Mother's Voice. So, if you have been listening to me, you know I've already said what my podcast was about. And I want to wrap this up. There were some things that I said I was going to talk more about, and I want to be a woman of my words. So I'm going to finish off the month of April with closing up some things that I left dangling and from my the Other Side of 45 podcast before I move into Hike, Heal, and Hustle. So if you're seeing this podcast and it says Hike, Heal, Hustle, please understand that that is the new name of the podcast. The old name was The Other Side of 45. These next couple of episodes in April leading up to Mother's Day will be The Other Side of 45. And Hike, Heal, and Hustle will launch on Mother's Day 2025, which, if memory serves me correctly, it's going to be, yes, May 11th. I just looked at my phone. It's May 11th. I will post on May 11th, the official Hike, Heal, Hustle. Okay, so let's get into it. My mother's voice. Recently, March 8th, actually, I returned actually on March 7th to South Carolina, where I'm from, for a funeral. It was my great aunt's funeral. She was the last of my grandmother's siblings. My grandmother is the last of 10. So very, very emotional return home. There was an aunt that I lived in the neighborhood with. I've known my entire life. So it was a difficult time, very emotional. Of course, it's a funeral of someone that I loved and cared about very deeply, and my cousins who are her grandkids. I really wanted to be there for them, and I wanted to be there for my grandmother. So anywho, very emotional, very difficult time for my family as we move forward without her. So my youngest and I drove to South Carolina late Friday, later than we wanted to. I'm not even going to get into what happened with that, honey. Anyway, I had a hotel room. Last time I was in South Carolina was to see my grandmother on Mother's Day. So that was Mother's Day 2024. I went back, had a great brunch prepared for her with my cousins, and I had planned to come back again 2025 Mother's Day, same thing. And my passed away before, so that's why I was back. I don't go back home very often. I've said it. If you know me on Facebook, then I will tell you this. I do have a Facebook for the podcast. It will not have personal things. My personal Facebook is for my family and friends, people that I've known in high school, and I post more personal things there. You won't see that on Hike, Heal, and Hustle Facebook. It will be only about the brand. Anyway, so I went back home that Friday evening. I wrote 2 great tributes. Thank you for all of those who are my family and friends who commented on those posts about my great aunt. Anyway, they were absolutely, just before I finished, and they were absolutely true. It was my honest feelings, very emotional. I left a lot of stuff out because there was a lot more that happened that I didn't want to put on Facebook. Anyway, so that Friday night we went up there kind of late. I think I got to my hotel right before 11 and checked in. It was a horrible check-in. The stay was fine, but that check-in was terrible. Anyway, they had to move my room. It was just, anyway. So the next morning, which was the day of the funeral started at 11, and I was at a hotel that was very close to where the funeral was going to be. and my girls, my daughters, at the time I didn't know who was going to pick me up. They were going to be passing the hotel, and I, just pick me up and we'll go together, because there was no reason for all three of us to drive. So that morning I had gone downstairs to the hotel buffet. It was terrible. So I was getting a cup of coffee, and I saw this woman from behind. So I'm sitting at a table. I had on my headphones, I had been texting my cousins to figure out what we're going to do after the funeral, what I needed to do, how I could help. And I saw this woman at the coffee, where the coffee was. And it's not huge. So it's like she was there dressed up, and there was somebody next to her, another guest in the hotel, no one I knew. And they were both by the coffee. So I didn't want to just go up there and just stand there and wait. So I've been keeping an eye to see when they would be done, and I can go up there and get me a cup of coffee. It was taking a while. I was like, pour it, move. Anyway, it was taking a while. So I had my headphones on, and I wear over the ear because I don't like things in my ear. So I wear over the ear headphones. So very visible, and plus I do it because I don't want people talking to me. So it was weird because I saw the lady from behind. I didn't recognize her because I was seeing her back. And I said, very, not really serious in my head. I was like, oh, it'd be weird if she was going to the funeral. So I got up and get my coffee. So the other guests had moved, but this woman was still there. It's like, oh my God, how long it take to make a cup of coffee? So I'm standing next to her, but I had my headphones on. I'm not paying attention. I come to get my coffee, going about my business. She was there, I don't know, brewing beans. I don't know. It was taking her forever. And apparently she had been calling me. She had recognized me before I recognized her. And then finally she got my attention. I turned around and I recognized her. I was like, oh my goodness. I take my headphones off and we talk. And it turns out she is my stepfather's sister. What are the chances? Actually pretty great. Anyway, I was surprised because I was like, she didn't know my aunt, did she? But she was there mostly for her brother and her sister-in-law, which is my mother. And, so we get to talking, and she was like, hey, let's go. I'm making my coffee. And she was like, hey, let's go have breakfast together. And I was like, okay. And so we go sit down next to each other, and we're kind of, you catching up and whatever. And what's odd is she's telling me things about my mother and her husband, which is my stepfather and this lady's brother. And she said it to me as if I know. And so, she's bringing up, oh, they did so-and-so. And I say, oh, I don't know. I don't know them. And I kept saying, I don't know. And I was referring to my mother by her first name. And then, after a couple, topics and stuff, she brings it up. She's like, yeah, why do you keep calling your mother by her first name? Is that what you do? And I, you guys, seriously, I have been doing this for so long. I didn't even realize that I was doing it, and that for someone who does not know my relationship with mother, would be surprised by it. Everybody else knows that we don't have a relationship, and I refer to her by her first name. And so she says, is that what you call her face? And I'm like, it dawns on me, she has no freaking idea that I have not spoken to this woman in years. So when she asked me, and I'm like, oh crap. And I said, no, because we don't talk. And she was like, what do you mean? I said, I really don't want to get into it, but the fact is I haven't spoken to them in years. I said, it really started around 2013, but it was actually in 2009. We were only speaking in terms of logistics for my girls to go see her. So we would have conversations more like, hey, do they need this? I'm going to pick them up. Let's meet here. It was very logistic conversations. We did not have meaningful conversations. We didn't talk about my life. It was just basic. They were young, and so I still had to be involved in her getting them, seeing them, and making that work. So from 2009-ish, 2010, my only conversations with her were about the girls, logistic things about the girls, any family emergencies that would come up, meaning funerals, which a few did, but no actual conversations the way people think of it when they talk about having conversations with their parents. That stopped many years ago. So, and after 2013, even when family emergencies came up, like funerals and stuff, we never talked. It was mostly through text, or at that point through my girls or through my siblings or cousins. So basically, I have not had a real conversation with my mother, I would say, since 2009. But after 2013, where the conversation basically just stopped existing at all, I had not actually heard her voice. And so I'm talking to my stepfather's sister, and she's hearing me use their, and I've always called him by his first name. And, she's like, "You guys don't talk?" So I was like, "No." And she said, "That's really strange." I said, "Well, I'm kind of used to it." But then I tell her this story. So this was on a Saturday. On Wednesday, prior to that Saturday, I said, "I'm going to tell you something that's very strange." I said, "This has been like this for a while, but I will tell you that this incident that happened." So I'm going to tell you what happened. It was, I don't know, late Wednesday afternoon, where I was upstairs in my room, and my oldest daughter was coming home, and I could hear, you hear the door open or whatever. And so I'm coming down the stairs, and she's in the kitchen. So my stairwell is it's like a wall, so you can't really see the person coming down, but you can hear them. And she was in the kitchen, so I'm coming downstairs, and I can hear her on the phone. So I know she's on the phone, and she has the phone on speaker. And I heard my mother's voice. So I'm coming down the stairs, but when I hear my mother's voice, I stop. And not so that I could listen to the conversation. They were just talking about, the funeral and stuff, but I wasn't listening, but I could hear her voice. And up until this point, there were times that my mother and I were in the same space, and she would talk, but she was never talking to me. And it was never a situation. It wasn't a situation that if you asked me what she said, I could tell you. It was just, how if you're in a space, a store, somewhere in public, and there are a lot of people, and you can hear other people's voices, but you're not focused on those voices because it has nothing to do with you. You're minding your business or whatever. Up until that point, the few times that I would hear my mother's voice, or excuse me, that I would hear her talk, it was never geared toward me, and it was never to me. So it was like background noise, like, they say the peanuts, adults and being, but, and that's literally how I've seen it since then, because I've heard her at that point, because she wasn't talking to me, and it was always directed at somebody else. So it was like background voices. But this day in particular, that Wednesday, when I was coming down the stairs, it was because my daughter had it on speaker and it was so loud, I could actually hear her voice. And hearing her voice was strange to me. And I kind of got triggered a little bit, not in a bad way. It was like a memory had been unlocked. And I was standing in the stairwell, and I was like, "Oh my God." I kid you not. I said, "That's my mother's voice." And I sat with that thought for a while, because it was strange to me, because I haven't heard her voice in a long time. And I hadn't thought about it in a long time. And the thing about it is, up until that point, when I said it in my head, rather, when I thought it in my head, I should say, that's my mother's voice, it was a connection that I had not had in such a long time, that it was weird. I felt very strange because since 2013, I would say officially in 2013, I had not really considered her my mother. I would refer to her as my mother, but I didn't really consider her my mother. I feel like in 2013 with that email that our relationship, when it officially dissolved and we both decided that we were done and we were moving apart from each other, I felt then that I no longer had a mother after that. And the last few years since 2013, it's been over 10 years, my gosh. It's been 15 years. I don't I don't consider her my mother, and I don't consider myself her daughter. I just don't. And it's I don't consider us family anymore. Um, I consider us relatives, and I've said that a lot on this podcast. She's a relative to me, and no more than a cousin or a distant, or I would say a distant cousin, or a relative that you don't see or hear from. That's how I was able to cope with being estranged since 2013, is by putting her in this category, because that's how my mind works, of a distant relative that you don't see, but you know you're related to, but that's about it. And so even though I've referred to her as mother or her first name, that's how I coped, is that she and I are no longer in a relationship. We don't have a relationship. We don't have a parent-child relationship anymore. I don't consider her my mother. But that day, that Wednesday in the stairwell, is the first time in a very long time that voice was connected to the original relationship of being my mother. So I told this story to my mother's husband's sister. My mother's husband's sister. Um, while we're having our coffee, and she found it very strange. And so everybody in my family knows that mother and I have not spoken. I won't say her first name, but I usually call her by her first name. In my family, that's how I refer her. I don't say my mother, I say her name. And so that's what triggered a conversation, like I was saying, with my mother's husband's sister. And she was like, so you call her by her first? I said, when I was telling her, I don't call her anything because we don't talk. And I told her about 2013. I didn't go into any. I told her, I said, I don't want to go into any details. Because she was showing me photos of them on her phone. And in that moment, she's showing me photo after photo after photo. And it's not like I didn't know this, okay? I had never thought of them in this way. They busy living their life. She's telling me about these major things that's going on. Like, I knew that my mother had retired. I have no idea what my stepfather does. I have no idea what my mother does on a regular basis. I don't know this woman. I don't know about them going on vacations. I don't know anything, like literally nothing about these people. And I was telling my mother's husband's sister this. I said, I don't know them, and they don't know me. And she was so puzzled. And this is the look, the talk that I haven't had to have in years. And I don't have these conversations very often. I can count how many people I've had this conversation with, because I just don't have a lot of friends. So it's like, wow, it's that look you get when someone finds out that you haven't spoken to your mother, and y'all are both okay with it. And it's like, I can't believe that she being a mother and her daughter being very close, me being a mother and me and both of my girls being really close. I get it. I understand that this is not the norm. If your mother is still alive, it is a hard thing to understand that you guys do not talk, and both of you are okay with that. And she asked me a question when I told her about hearing mother's voice and how that familiarity came back, because I had decided that she's not my mother. I'm not her daughter. We're just relatives. And she was like, well, how are you dealing with this? And who do you have to talk to? And I said, well, it's been so long. I said, up until this point, I hadn't considered her my mother. It wasn't until I heard her voice. And so she was like, well, who do you have to talk to? And I told her, I was like, nobody. It's okay though. I said it was just this moment in time, this incident that it just made me think about it. And I said, and I know it's because of the funeral and the reason why, my aunt who passed away, her children, her grandkids, nobody will ever hear her voice again. Whereas I am not used to hearing my mother's voice for a totally different reason. So, it's easy to understand that a person won't hear somebody that they're related to's voice again, someone that they care about, one because they're no longer on the earth. That's something we can all understand, except we understand it's very sad, it's very emotional. But when you don't hear a voice because of a choice you made, and it's like, oh wow, that's odd. So she was having a hard time, and she kept asking me why, and I told her, I'm like, I don't want to get into it. And she was like, I won't tell them. I said, you don't think they know? I said, they know. I don't care if you tell them. I will probably never see them again. And she was like, I said, the only time I see them is when something like this happens. I will not see my mother again, unfortunately, until another funeral. That's just facts. Both of my girls have graduated from college. Up until 2013, I saw my mother when the girls graduated from high school and then again from college. That's it. I don't ever see her again. When I go to South Carolina, she does not know I'm there. I do not seek her out. When I went for Mother's Day, I did not see her. She probably found out that I came through my grandmother and one of my cousins. I don't know, but I didn't see her. When I go to South Carolina, I don't see my mother. I don't look for my mother. I don't tell her I'm coming. We don't cross paths. I do not cross paths with her until something like this happens. So when she was like, oh, I won't tell them, I said, they know. What do you mean? So during the course of the conversation while we're having coffee, she was showing me these pictures because she loves her brother. They're very close. Oh, we go on fishing, we're doing this. And she's talking to me like I know them. And so when I was going back to what I said, when I said to her, I don't know these people. They don't know me. We don't know each other. I don't know what's going on in their life. They don't know what's going on in my life. We lived completely different lives. And she was like having a hard time swallowing this. And she was wanting to know why. And I told her, I said, I don't want to get into it. But I told her the gist of it. I said, listen, I'm not part of the cult. I'm not going back. They know this. And it just irritated me at one point. And I like her. And I'm not mad at her. It just irritated me because she kept speaking about her brother as if she can't believe this. And I'm like, why would I lie? And so it got to the point where I just had to shut it down. And I said, your version of your brother is different than my version of him. I don't know him the way you know him. And she just kind of looked at me. Now, this is a very intelligent woman. She used to be a school teacher. She's in her 70s now, of course, so she's retired. And she gets it. She just looked at me. She was like, oh, okay. So we continued the conversation, and she asked me more about my belief system, and I told her I was an agnostic atheist. I explained that, and we went, and she wants to, oh, but why? But I have not had, and I told her this, I have not had to explain or defend who I am and my belief system in such a long time. And that's the thing when you go back home. See, people remember you in the last version that they saw of you. So if it's been 20 plus years, that's the version that they remember. I don't remember her. I don't. The last time I saw her probably is when her mother passed away, when I went to her mother's funeral. But even then, it was more of a wave, hey, and we moved on. We didn't sit and have a conversation. The last time I talked to this woman, I was a literal child. I wasn't even a teenager. So we're talking 35 to 40 years ago. That's the version of me she remembers. I am not that child anymore. I probably was 10, 11, 12 last time I saw her. I am 50 now. I am not the same person I used to be. You don't know who I am. I don't know who you are. And when I say that, I don't know what kind of person you are. I know your name, and that's it. I don't know how you live. I don't know how you operate. I don't know where you live. I don't know your likes, your dislike, things you do. So when she was thumbing through her phone and, oh, this is when they were doing it, and she was like, you remember? And I'm like, I don't know them. I don't get this. You're showing me pictures and photos of people I don't know. And so when she finally let that sink in, and I know that, look, I haven't seen it very often. Like I said, I don't have a lot of friends, so I haven't had to explain this relationship with people that's in my life in a very long time. And when I did, it wasn't with very many people. But I remember that look you get when you tell somebody that you don't have a relationship with your mother. And I got that look from her, a look I haven't seen in such a long time. And I was like, oh, here we go. And she, we had a conversation about it. And, it's the same. It always ends, they close the conversation the same way. I hope that you guys, and I said, it's not going to happen. I want people to understand that I have literally zero hope, or I don't even want to say hope because it makes it seem like it's something I'm looking forward to. I don't think it's ever going to happen. Let's just say that. So as much as you guys want this to be changed and you want to say, oh, maybe you and your mom, and she even said, well, what if? I said, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I'm okay with it. She's okay with it. He's okay with it. And she was like, wow. And right when it was time for me to leave, and she went, my brother. And I looked at her, and right before because we had moved from having coffee to went to her room, she asked me to come up to her room because I said, well, look, I got to get dressed. She was dressed, and I got to take a shower and get ready for the service. We had plenty of time, but I'm just saying I was trying to end this conversation because I could see it was getting more emotional for her because this is her first time hearing it. I no longer have any emotions tied to them. So when I tell people, it seems very stoic, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe she's just, and I told her, I said, it's been a long time for me. This is your first time hearing about it. And so, like I said, she's a smart woman. She gets it. So, but even in the course of the conversation, she kept, my brother, he wouldn't. And I was literally had my hand on the door leaving her room. And I turned around and I looked at her. And I said, because I had already told her, your version of your brother is not the version that I have ever known. And if you've listened to my podcast before, he and I have literally never gotten along. And so, and I didn't say that to her because I know how she feels about her family. They're very, very close. So I got my hand on the door of her hotel room, and I'm about to leave to go to my room. Our rooms right next to each other, y'all. Believe it or not, she was at 205. I was at 206. And so I just literally got to walk out and go to my room, which was across the hall. And I stopped and I said, your brother on Thanksgiving Day 2017 told me, and my daughter was sitting right next to her, she could hear his voice, that I was a terrible parent. And she was shocked because my brother would never, that's not how he was raised. When she was defending the fact that I was no longer talking to them, she tried to make it seem like it was all my mother. And when I told her that, and she just looked at me, I said, yeah, that's your brother. He said I was a terrible mother. And she just looked at me like he would never. Yes, he would. Did. And I said, when he said that to me, I said, there were other things that he said, but when he said that to me, I said, you know how we ended that conversation? I said, I told him, I don't ever want to hear or see you again. And she was like, she just looked at me, her eyes were, she was like, oh my God. I said, and I meant that. And I don't ever want to see or hear from him again. And I left. The version of who you are in somebody else's mind is their reality. Even if everybody's going to have a different version of you. Her version of her brother is all the great things that she was trying to convince me that I should try to mend this relationship. Oh, he's such a great person. He and I was fishing the other day, and you know what? And she's going on and on and on and on and on and on. And I'm like, This is not the version of him that I know. This is not the version that I saw when I was a child. He was mean to us. He was mean to my kids. He is not a nice person. And even though I couldn't say that to her because she was my brother, my brother, my brother, my brother, and I was like, that's not the man that I know. This is the man that I know. The man who told me that I was a bad person, that I was a bad parent without having any proof. And he even told me why. And I told him, and he even told me why. He told me because I won't bring my kids back to this organization. They want to have nothing else to do with it. That's what he told me. He told me why. And it all had to do with this religion. And I walked out the door. And I know that portion, she asked first of all, but it's like, do you not understand that your brother is not my brother? Our relationships are going to be different. And so people can have different versions of you, but let them have those different versions of you. It may be difficult. Like I go back home and they all have a different version of me. I am not that person they think I am. They don't know that I am into sound healing and nature. And then I'm trying to change my life to be, by the time I'm 55, and this is going to be on Hike, Heal, and Hustle, there's a certain version of me that I'm working on now at 50 to be even more different when I turn 55. I'm not the same person that I was when I started my 50s by 50 list. Those things that was on that list was meant to be the kind of person that I wanted to be today. And I accomplished a lot of that stuff. But my family, my relatives rather, will never know that version of me because the last thing they remember is me. Some of them, their last version, the last me that they knew was when I was in my 20s, before I had kids. And here I am at 50, and it's hard for them to get in their head that she's not the person that she used to be in the 90s, that she's had a lot of life that they know nothing about and they don't care to know anything about. So that they operate in the space that this is the person they knew, even though it's been 30 years. My grandmother, who I talk to all the time, who I see, she still has a version of me that she doesn't get. They never ask about who I am today, the things that I'm interested in, the kind of person that I want to be, the kind of person that I am. They never ask about that. And even when I bring it up, I can tell you right now, they're not listening. How many times I've had to tell my grandmother to say, my grandmother's different. She's older. She's in her 80s. She may not remember. But even when you're talking to her, she goes back to that version that she's comfortable with, not the new version of me. And it can be a little frustrating, and which is one of the reasons why I don't go home that often. But when I heard my mother's voice, that version of her came running back. The woman that did those things that I enjoyed. I remember having conversations with her. And in the past, when I remember those conversations, I didn't remember her voice. But that day in that stairwell in my home, I remembered that old version of my mother. I remember the good things that voice brought back, memories. And then the new version of us, where I don't even consider her my mother anymore. But that day, that moment, that voice was the voice of my mother. When me being a mother, I remember when I had my girls and they would hear my voice as babies and they would, their head would move because they're looking for this familiar voice. And that's kind of how I felt in that stairwell. I recognized that voice. I recognized it was the voice of the person that brought me into this world. And then the realization that I probably will never hear that voice again came. And while it may seem sad or unfortunate or disappointing or discouraging, I accept that. I accept that hearing her voice that day on speaker, not even talking to me, I can tell you right now what she said, but I just remember the familiarness of it. I probably will never get that again. And while I accept it and I understand it logistically as a mother, is difficult because I would never want that for my children. I want them to always know my voice is their mother's voice. And when they hear it, I want them to have fond memories. And I want them to be able to say, that's my mother's voice, in a way that it doesn't stand out. And for me, that day it stood out because I'm not used to hearing it. So thank you for listening today. This is a longer than usual episode because I haven't had an episode in a while. This particular thing that happened this past March, I knew when I heard the voice and had the conversation with my mother's husband's sister that I was going to record and talk about this. So keep following. I'll post another video on Friday, and then I'll try to post one on every Monday. If once I get all the episodes down, it may be every Monday and every Friday, so I can get all of the episodes in before Mother's Day, before Hike, Heal, and Hustle officially launches. But that's the kind of content that the Other Side of 45 used to give. As you can see, it can get very intense. And Hike, Heal, and Hustle will include some of these stories, but hopefully in a different light. It'll be like lighter and better. I don't know. But anyway, I'll see you on the Other Side of 45. You can find me no longer at the Other Side of 45. Put in Hike, Heal, and Hustle. If it's your first time listening, go back and listen to some of the old episodes, catch yourself up, and I will see you on Friday with another wrapping it up, the Other Side of 45, but officially Hike, Heal, and Hustle. Please rate this podcast 5 stars. Leave your reviews. It helps other people find me. Have a wonderful day.